All right, we continue to look at Dave Hunt, the Berean Call, Cry Out for Liberty, a view on today's Islam. That was back in 2003. Still is the same, maybe even worse. We're looking at where we left off during World War II. During World War II, Haj. During World War II, Haj Amin collaborated with the Germans, the Nazis. Amin fled to Berlin, from which place he broadcast, "Arabs, rise as one man and slaughter the Jews wherever you find them. This place pleases Allah. Jews fought on the side of the Allies. This is the same Quran." The Arabs joined Hitler. As a reward, he promised to exterminate the Jews in their countries as he was doing in Europe. But in February 1945, when the Allied victory was certain, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Lebanon declared war on Germany, an act required before March 1st, 1945 by any country that desired to join the newly organized United Nations. Wow, how hypocritical. November 29, 1947, after 6 million Jews had perished, a briefly conscience-stricken UN in Resolution 181 gave them 18% of the ancient land of Israel, misnamed Palestine, all of which the League of Nations, recognizing its historical connection to the Jewish people, had allotted for their national homeland. The mandate for Palestine, July 24, 1922, 7 was to be administered to by Britain under the Balfour Doctrine. I have a number of statements on that. Unhappy with being given 82% of what the world had admitted belonged to the Jews and demanding it all, employing outside forces and arms from Arab states as distant as Iraq, Arabs rioted, plundered, and murdered Jews, encouraged by the British, who were hoping for an excuse to abandon their mandate to establish the Balfour Doctrine, to establish the Jewish homeland. Britain's betrayal of the Jews beginning in 1920s in favor of the oil-rich Arabs brought about the end of its empire, on which the sun never sank, another fulfillment of God's warning, "I will curse him that curseth thee." Something worse than Nazism was rising, an Arab religion called Islam, which centuries before had forcefully conquered most of the world. This time its monopoly of oil was its major weapon. When Israel declared its independence in May 1948, it was instantly attacked by the regular armies of 6 Muslim nations, whose leaders publicly vowed to annihilate every Jew. Assam Pasha, Secretary General of the Arab League, promised this will be a war of extermination. Palestine, like Arabia, was to be made Jew-free. Muslim leaders, both political and religious, more openly than Hitler, repeatedly call for the extermination of all Jews. Islam requires the death of all Jews before its last day judgment can occur. On November 23, 1937, Saudi Arabia's King Ibn Saud said, "For a Muslim to kill a Jew ensures him an immediate entry into heaven." PLO leader Farouk Kaddoumi vowed, "This Zionist ghetto of Israel must be destroyed." 10 Palestinians marching in support of Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait chanted, "Saddam, you hero, attack Israel with chemical weapons." An Arabic translation of Mein Kampf is a bestseller today in Palestinian Authority territory. Textbooks in Syria lead pupils to the inevitable conclusion that all Jews must be annihilated. Calls for annihilation of Jews still resound throughout the Muslim world, such as the Friday sermon in Gaza's Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan Mosque, October 14, 2000, by Ahmed Abu Halabaya. The Jews must be butchered, having no mercy. Kill them and those Americans who established Jew Israel here in the beating heart of the Arab world. Sikh Ibrahim Mahdi vowed in a sermon on Palestinian television June 8, 2001, Allah willing, Israel will be erased, the United States will be erased, Britain will be erased. Blessings to whoever put a belt of explosives on his body or on his sons and plunged into the midst of Jews. There's your way to heaven. Gospel of the Quran. Incredibly, Zionism, the belief that Jews have a right to their national homeland, was condemned as racism by UN General Assembly Resolution 3379 on November 10, 1975. 16 long years later, 1691, that vote was reversed over Muslim protests. Yet Zionism is still a capital crime in Iraq. Few, whether Jews or their enemies, acknowledge that the Middle East conflict involves the last days reestablishment of God's chosen people in the land he promised to them. Today's events were foretold in biblical prophecies that validate the Bible beyond dispute as God's word. As prophesied, Israel has become what President Eisenhower called the most strategically important area in the world. When it became a nation once again, about 800,000 Jews, nearly double the number of original Palestinian refugees, fled to Israel from the horror they had long endured in Muslim countries. Here is the tally of Jews in various countries in 1948 and today. Algeria, 140,000, and then 75. Egypt, 75,000, now 200. Iraq, 150,000, led to 100. Lebanon, 20,000, 50. Libya, 38,000, none. Morocco, 265,000, 5,800. Syria, 330,000, 150. Tunisia, 105,000, 1,500. Yemen and Aden, 63,000, 150, etc. Following the Six-Day War in 1967, the UN Security Council determined to investigate the treatment of Jews in Arab countries. Syria, Iraq, Egypt, however, refused to allow entrance of the investigative commission. We now look back with disbelief and shame upon the Nazi era and the barbaric determination to exterminate a race. In contrast, the Islamic world looks back with approval. Their only regret today is that Hitler didn't finish his intended annihilation of all the Jews. As Egyptian newspaper columnist Ahmed Rageb wrote, "Thanks to Hitler, blessed memory, although we do have a complaint, his revenge on the Jews was not enough." At the same time, much of the Muslim world denies the Holocaust. As University of Gaza history lecturer Dr. Issam Sisalem declared, "They are all lies. No Dachau, no Auschwitz. The Holocaust was against our people." God created man in his own image, with the capacity to choose whether to love or obey God or to rebel against him. God desires a willing obedience and love, but love cannot be forced. Liberty to choose is essential for love. Seeking to win men's heart, God, please come now and let us reason together. Isaiah 1:18. In contrast, Satan enslaved men with lies. Whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. John 8:34. Tyrants enslave their fellows. The worst offenses are the Caesars, the popes, and the Mohammeds and Hitlers. Of all who still follow their example is not the enslavement of flesh and blood, but the tyrannical example to conquer the human soul and spirit. There is no reasoning with tyrants. Dave Hunt goes on to say, back in the early 2000s, there is not one Muslim country today where basic God-given liberties are enjoyed. And that's true today. Saudi Arabia abstained from the International Declaration of Human Rights adopted 12/10/48 by the UN. An Islamic Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by Muslim nations on 1981. The rights it offers are all according to Sharia, Islamic law, exactly as the Taliban practiced it, and the Sunnah, the example and way of life of the Prophet. That's not human rights, that's human destruction. Saudi Arabia, Islam's holy land, has accomplished what Nazi Germany aimed for, a Jew-free country. In obedience to Islam's founding prophet, Muhammad, no Jew is allowed in Saudi Arabia, and only Muslims can be citizens. This is Nazism resurrected. There should be an international cry of outrage, yet there is silence. Oil, oil, oil. Any question as to whether the hijackers, the Taliban, and suicide bombers are fanatics or real Muslims is easily dispelled, as is the delusion spread by President Bush and other political and religious leaders that Islam is peace and tolerance. One need only look at Saudi Arabia. There stands Islam's holiest state, the Kaaba in Mecca, to which each Muslim must make a pilgrimage, a Hajj, once in his lifetime. There Islam began, is headquartered, and demonstrated. In Saudi Arabia, one may see what daily life would be like in America and Europe if Islam could fulfill its goal of taking over the world. A woman cannot drive a car or even her house without her husband's permission and a male relative to escort her. No non-Muslim place of worship or any public expression that does not agree with Islam is allowed. To question Islam is a crime, and for a Muslim to convert to any other religion carries the death penalty. This is not fanaticism, it is Islam. Muhammad said, whoever relinquishes his faith, kill him. Upon Muhammad's death, thousands of Arabs attempted to abandon Islam, into which they had been forced by the sword. In the wars of apostasy, tens of thousands of former Muslims, all Arabs, were killed in bringing Arabia back under Islam. All Muslims ought to be ashamed. The leadership of Saudi Arabia ought to be ashamed. How can Muslim countries sit in the United Nations and talk of freedom when they won't allow it? How can Muslims take advantage of the liberties in the free world to build their mosques and worship freely, to speak out against any who disagree with them, while knowing in their hearts that the religion they promote would suppress those liberties if it took over? This is hypocrisy of the highest order. For years there has been an ongoing Holocaust in Muslim countries. More than 2 million non-Muslims, mostly Christians, have been killed in Indonesia, Nigeria, Sudan, and elsewhere, with hundreds of churches destroyed. Must we wait until this Islamic Holocaust reaches 6 million? There ought to be an immediate international cry of outrage and revulsion. We are including names and addresses of political, media, and religious leaders. We ask every reader to make copies of this article and or insert and send it with a cover letter of protest to as many of these leaders as possible. Let us act before any more are slaughtered. Of course, that didn't come to pass back early in the 2000s, and now we're at 2021 looking at 2022.